Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
So welcome to the show. It's strange not being on air yesterday, but of course the budget, we budgeted for the budget, didn't we? Anyway, my name's Ashraf Garda, back today, and certainly you are back, and hopefully you were listening to the budget as well yesterday. So the budgets are gone, doesn't mean we're not going to talk about other big issues, and probably the biggest one, as we reflect on where South Africa right now is the issue of Ubuntu. There's been a sense for a while now, hasn't there, that many people reflect on the spirit of Ubuntu and reflecting in a very positive way to say, well, South Africans have it. However, more and more, I'm listening to people saying we've lost it. Because you can't have, as a nation, you can't lay claim to that spirit of Ubuntu when every single day you hear one story after another of, in effect, actions by human beings that are completely contrary to that spirit of Ubuntu. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Love your calls. You can call in right away. In fact, 0891 104207, 0891 104207. You need to save that number. We're asking the question, what needs to be done for South Africa to return to an Ubuntu culture? Of course, we're making the assumption that overall we have lost that Ubuntu culture. There's a sense that there's lip service, but just how practical is that culture at this point in time? So what for you needs to be done for South Africa to return to living an Ubuntu culture? You tell me. 0891 104207. You can also communicate with me via SMS. I'll read them out, 34701. They cost R2. There's also Twitter, and if you are tweeting, cut me in on that timeline. Also, please use the hashtag #TheBigQuestion. That's for the first half an hour of the show. And also, I'll pick out some of the Facebook comments as well. And there's some pretty choice comments, naturally, that comes through. There's also a chance for you to win some tickets. You know, we spoke about it the other day, the Verve Masters Polo Tournament. Well, you have a chance to win it, so do stay tuned for that as well. Now, also on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, on a Thursday, I'm losing touch because yesterday was this day off for me. On a Thursday, we go green. We talk about saving the planet, and there are three big issues that we cover there. And then after 3 o'clock, the man in the spotlight today is, well, he's really in the spotlight. He's been in the news all for the last week. Are we talking about the material man, Riyad Moosa? Riyad Moosa, the man in the spotlight. Don't miss that. Try and get serious with the funny man. In fact, if I can do just that. Right. Let me also give you some feedback on the issue of the Off My Chest. We've had some great emails from people because the way we're going to do it, of course, it didn't happen yesterday. But on a Wednesday, 2:30 to 3, we pick up on issues that you raise. I want you to email me. And to the best of our abilities, we'll try and either match you up with a partner when you've got a genuine concern. If it's a national issue, we'll just raise it anyway. And I'd certainly love that. But you need to email me with a very specific point that you make. Just in that subject column as well, just write down there Off My Chest so I know exactly what you are in fact talking about. Right, let's then go with the issue of the spirit of Ubuntu, South Africa's culture of Ubuntu. Do we make the assumption that overall we've lost it? Let's talk more about it. Professor Lesiba Tefo is with me, the head of the Institute for African Renaissance Studies at UNISA. Professor Tefo, good afternoon. Hi.
Good afternoon, Afras, and to the listeners.
Well, thanks for giving up your time. Let's start with this, because we're asking the question, what needs to be done for South Africa to return to an Ubuntu culture? It makes the assumption that, in effect, although we pay lip service to it, we don't have that culture. We're nowhere near practicing it as strongly as we lay claim to. Your thoughts on that?
Well, look, first we have to acknowledge that we are living in a morally fractured society. And what are the factors and circumstances leading to same? Before we can say how do we restore the moral fiber, namely the one that is entrenched in the philosophy of Ubuntu, or in a way of life that we call Ubuntu or Ubuntu. Now, attempts were made since post-1994. But all of them seem destined to fail, and I dare say, precisely because either we are being archaic, conservative, in the manner in which we want to restore the moral fiber, or we are not being realistic enough to say this is a changing society that is today in charge of itself and its destiny. And the idealistic way of looking at the world through the African lens would warrant us to take cognizance of these material conditions that also have depraved some of us, that also have corrupted the notion of Ubuntu, that also is making one the center rather than the group. Central to the philosophy of Ubuntu is that the collective take precedence over the individual. But contemporary modern society and economics would put it otherwise. Now, how do we balance that? That is a challenge that we are faced with. And as we try to restore the moral fiber, be it Ubuntu, clearing, or humanism, or men's-like hate, we must take cognizance of that.
So you do agree, I mean, the spirit of Ubuntu, in whichever way we phrase it, is absolutely key for South Africa to, as a nation, to live out its time morally. And in the absence of that, you find there's all sorts of ills that affect the country.
Undoubtedly. Look, and it's something that can be taught, and it's something that one can inherit or suck from one's mother's teeth. And it's very crucial and central. And in essence, you don't consciously teach people Ubuntu. You just nurture children in a certain way, be it in the Jewish, Afrikaner, or an African family. I dare say, it is not peculiar to Africans. It's a universal concept underpinned by universal values and tenets. And the smallest unit of the society is the family. And if we start there to get it right, that's how we nurture our children. To nurture them suggests that we would necessarily ourselves be exemplary, be models, be worthy of the lectures and that culture that we want to impart or to pass through to our children.
In fact, somebody asked me, what exactly is Ubuntu? I'm just reading through some of the definitions. It's Ubuntu is an African ethic or humanist philosophy focusing on people's allegiances and relations with each other. Some believe that Ubuntu is a classical African philosophy or worldwide worldview, whereas others point out that the idea that Ubuntu is a philosophy of worldview has developed in written sources in recent years. Now, I thought interesting, Archbishop Desmond Tutu gave his definition saying, a person with Ubuntu is open and available to others. Affirming of others does not feel threatened that others are able and good, based from a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole and is diminished when others are humiliated or diminished when others are tortured or oppressed. Now, I know some of you who, in fact, may not even follow the philosophy or that line of Ubuntu, may actually be practicing it anyway. You may not be calling it that. You may be calling it whatever it may be in your faith or your understanding. But certainly the spirit of being there for everybody is critically important. And we're asking the question, do you find that in fact it has diminished in South Africa at this point in time? And if that's the case, then what needs to be done to bring it back? If in fact you agree that it should be, that it is absent, in fact, right. So I'll get to some of the callers. Sig, we're going to come up in a second as well. But I'll tell you what, I want to pick out one or two interesting things before I do that. Let's get Nelson Mandela's views of Ubuntu as well. Well, he's saying a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people gave him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu. But it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? Right, let's get to Sig, in fact, in Randburg. Hi.
Good afternoon,
Good
Ashraf.
afternoon. Yep.
Ashraf, I'm very, very worried about that we're having the exact opposite of Ubuntu happening on an ever quicker and faster and wider spread scale. We have the crime and corruption that goes everywhere, in every municipality and right up everywhere, is one of the things. But and it's a sort of a mafia kind of might is right thing. We can get away with it, and we're not going to be prosecuted, just like Willie Hofmeyr said when 5 prosecutions have happened over the past decade, and we're expecting 100 to happen in another couple of years only. But what is really of concern is that this happens from the family life. There has ceased to be a family life. The typical African family today, as I understood it, that's what Kolani Kwala said on the morning 8 o'clock show the other day, and he repeated other opinions, of course, but that was an accepted opinion that the typical African family is fatherless. And I think that's where it all starts from, and that
okay, so
moral fiber is gone, and there is no Ubuntu when women are being raped on this massive, ever-increasing scale that the rape is taking place, and it's become a new culture. Yes. And that is the very opposite. I cannot believe that this African culture, which is rape, which it has become, could have been the ancestral culture. I cannot believe that.
Okay.
But it is now the face of Africa, and it's happening in every office, in every ANC office.
Sig, we got that. You're saying Africa, South Africa, but let's stay with this country for now. Thanks for that call. So let's get some other views. I mean, there's Sig clearly very critical of where we are as a country. What about you? Are we talking not politics? We're just talking about the communal spirit, and better be careful what I'm saying. Communal as opposed to communism. The communal spirit that we claim to have, the spirit that we claim has been critical to keeping communities together through the worst of times. So, in fact, where then is that spirit right now? I'll go to my guest in a moment. I thought let me get a couple of more calls on this issue. Janus in Cape Town, hi.
Hi, Ashraf. Whether we call it Ubuntu or building of our nations, I think the same meaning. I was a member of Freedom Front when I came to South Africa, and I was very conservative, you know me, anti-communist. I'm still anti-communist because the damage they did to the country and to the people. But we should go forward. We shouldn't just, see the difference between our people. When I was the Freedom Front member, it was during the General Conference Falyun, and he said to us, and I admire this man, that we should stop creating the division. And that's why actually many people didn't like him, and he gave up the politics. And then the brother Mulders came, and now they're telling us that about the historical, point and dates.
All right, Janus, quickly, I want to ask you, I don't want to reflect on the past. Let's talk about now, because my question we're asking, the big question in the first half an hour is, what does South Africa need to do to return to Ubuntu? So I'm talking of practical steps. What needs to be done?
Like, for instance, if you take me as an example, I will give you as I said, I was conservative, but now I've got an organization which supports the poor community. We are among the blacks and the colors people, and we see each other as a partners, not based on the culture, not based on the religion or color of the skin.
Okay.
And only that way we can go forward.
All right, thanks for that one there. I thought I'm going to get to the other callers in just a second. Lyndall's raised an interesting point, saying, how can you return to a culture which existed only inside the tribe but did not apply to relations between the tribes? So we do have Professor Lesiba Tefo, the head of the Institute for African Renaissance Studies at UNISA, with me as well. You want to respond to that point, which I thought is rather interesting?
Look, for me, Ubuntu is not peculiar to Africans. Mm-hmm. You have got conspicuous and conspicuanism. You get that in the East. In Indian philosophy, you get that. You get affluring of the Enlightenment preaching, right? The Renaissance, the revival of the spirit. Mm-hmm. You get African people over the years, over millennia, have had norms and values, tenets and characteristics that underpinned their way of life. And when you look at the universality, or the universality of Ubuntu, it doesn't care what you call it. It is there in human people. Mm-hmm. But the only difference is the extent to which it is reflected and lived. Perhaps it's more prevalent among the Africans today than it is in other racial groups. And that also can be contested. But nonetheless, it is where we are, and it is our point of reference. But after allowing me to go back to attempts that were made since 1994, perhaps if we revisit them, we can go some distance. One, in 1988, at Cairo's Hotel, President Mbeki, then Deputy, convened an African Renaissance Conference. There was a section or a chapter to which I contributed to the book and to the debate, and it was solely intended to discuss how we can restore the moral fiber of the society. The book is there. There are suggestions we made, therefore, by Bijana and Jordisho. And then there were attempts made under the then Bantustan KwaZulu-Natal, I think that I don't know what the earlier one, but it was under Buthelezi. There was a syllabus intended to teach Ubuntu. Unfortunately, it was ideologically informed, and that's why it collapsed. There were also initiatives in other universities to at least mainstream Ubuntu philosophy into the programs. That also didn't really succeed. But I blame nobody but ourselves for all the failures of the initiatives. Then, I think it was Minister Pando attempted to inculcate, to come up with a concept of a pledge. While politically controversial, but that in and by itself would have contributed in a way, especially to the young ones. I think St. Augustine would say, catch them young, to begin to inculcate the type of culture that we would want to see characterize them. And maybe lastly, there is also what the Department of Education initiated, a certificate in human rights and values, to teach teachers so that they can go and teach others. And those values would be Afrocentric. So there have been several attempts, but ironically, somewhere along the way, they just not get at least adhered to and are implemented. And this is not inconsistent with proliferous policy formulation in the country which are not followed up. But maybe the last point would be, to what extent did religious education under apartheid and before apartheid contribute to moral formation or character formation? I'm one of those who argued then, and I'm still arguing, bring it back. Because
religious education,
2 minutes or 5 minutes in the assembly contributed to the lives of Mandela and the Tudus that you have today.
Well, that's an interesting point, and it does raise
ideologically underpinned. But religious education, not Christianity, but religious education, religious orientation, for a few minutes daily can contribute to what the society.
So just being godly, just God conscious, doesn't matter which particular persuasion you may follow. Interesting one. Let's get to some of the other callers. I'll get to Pat and Motala in just a second. Ronaldo in Port Elizabeth, you're on the air. Hi.
Hi there. How's it going?
I'm good. Well, what's your point?
Just a quick one. Just touching on this whole. My point was the religious education. I'm 32 years old now, and when there was still apartheid, the apartheid years and the apartheid era, I found that the Ubuntu was still a lot more prevalent in the oppressed societies, as they now call them. Once there was sort of this freedom, people became more entwined in becoming more successful, and the whole family values thing sort of dropped by the wayside. And also this banning of the banning of the religious education in the schools. That children don't know how to pray anymore.
So what you're saying, if we want to fix Ubuntu, we got to get back into being more godly at schools. Doesn't matter which religious, which persuasion you may well follow, right? Okay, there's another one. Thanks for that. Thanks for that call. Right, Pat in Freiburg. Hi.
Good day, Ashraf. Well, I think you couldn't have found a better scholar on Ubuntu because Ntate Tifo, I met him for the first time when Ntate Koka was still alive, and we were studying Kokaology or Africology. But basically the point I want to make is that according to Ntate Khalushi Koka's view, he said, Ubuntu, Ntu is a key root word, and the root word Ntu refers to divinity. Now, the problem with South Africa or the South African Democratic Constitution is that it is a secular democratic constitution, and secularism as an ideology tends to reject God or religion or emphasis on religion, because we had an apartheid state which was a religious state. Now we go into a state that does no longer highlight religion as such. So I think Ubuntu is not a religion. Ubuntu is a spirituality that acknowledges the femininity or the power of the female as representing God, because the Bible says male and female made he them. So it doesn't matter whether you see a man or not. But the important thing also is that we are moving away from a patriarchalist society that emphasizes the power of men above the power of women. The point I'm trying to make here is that because the secular ideology in democracy tended to overpower everything, we have seen moral decline, moral degeneration. That is why the solution cannot come from religion as such, whether it is Christian or whatever religion you choose. What is important is that people must recognize that Ubuntu is based on God, and that everybody has got this God power inside them, and that they should try to rediscover that which is good within all of us.
Okay,
and it is not about black people as such, because anyway, a white person is actually a child of black people, if we accept that the first people on earth were black, and then the white people came later.
Pat, I'm going to move on.
Pat,
you've made your point. I'm going to move on.
Thanks
for that one there. So there you go, another one. Pat's in fact saying maybe don't look at certainly the absence of religion in South Africa as a dominant force, although people are religious people. Does that have an impact? Another one saying, hi, Ashraf. We need to have respect and understanding of our cultures, less emphasis on the material, from Charles. By the way, talking about material, I speak to the lead actor in the movie Material, Rian Musa. He's the man in the spotlight after 3. Another one which I thought was rather interesting is a white middle-aged woman. I feel more courtesy from black males these days, from Joan. Ubuntu means respect, taking care, helping, and most of all, to be truthful to one another. From, I think it's called TE in Jose. It's because of Ubuntu that we lost our land. From Bob in Kinross. Really? Explain that. Right, Haley, please stay on the line. I really want to hear what you have to say, and other first-time callers as well. Botala in Durban, hi.
Hello. Now, Ubuntu was there all the time, provided the objective conditions under which the people live are the same. Today, we are living in an industrialized society in which your neighbor is not your relative. Each person living around you is somebody else not belonging to your same group or religion or whatever it is. Whereas in the past, even during the time of the Prophet, the people belonging to the same group lived in a clan in one small area where they cultivated the land. Each cared for the other. And that is what the Prophet emphasized. He said that we are all human beings. We are brothers to each other. So Ubuntu is good as long as we have the objective conditions. Which are, today's world is what is that we emphasize individualism.
Okay, and that's the point made by many others as well.
Individual freedom.
All right.
We forget the neighbor, forget the man. Love thy neighbor, we have forgotten.
Okay, Motala, thanks for that one. Haley in Joburg, hi.
Hi, Ashraf, to you and to your listeners.
Thank you.
Look, I want to talk about Ubuntu, something very important, according to myself.
All right, quickly.
The people or the society couldn't have the fear of the God at the beginning. When we talk about the African Renaissance, African Rainbow Nation, African diaspora, let's talk about the philosophy of the Ubuntu, the people lost the fear of the God at the beginning. So there's a lot of murder, a lot of killing, a lot of cruelty. That is lack of Ubuntu which shows. The other thing also, Ubuntu can discipline the nation, which was west of even the financial side, if you look at.
All right, so Haley,
a lot of money to add to the side of the deal.
Haley, I'm going to interject you because we've got a minute to go. Let's move on to the more important one now, in terms of what needs to be done to revive that spirit of Ubuntu.
Yeah, we need to discipline the generation and the discipline of the human being who can understand the value of the life of the humanity and the human being. So then they can understand. If you understand Ashraf is a human being, I'm not going to murder and the killing in a society like this. To teach the Ubuntu is such a very difficult and hazard. So then I must care about the Ashraf life, and you care about my life. So that means those who doesn't know the value of the life, how do we can teach those people about the Ubuntu?
Okay, thanks. Where, in fact, do we start? Appreciate that call, Haley. Now, Al Said on tweeting saying, well, Ubuntu in South Africa is the reason why we did not have bloodshed in South Africa, but we must not let unemployed youth be that catalyst. Dark River Omar saying, what is Ubuntu in South Africa? Togetherness of community and a key principle that led to the abolishment of the death penalty. Top editor INT also tweeting saying, Ubuntu in South Africa is like the dodo in Mauritius, extinct. That's way I feel sorry for the dodo. Right, let's get a quick 30-second goodbye to conclude with Professor Lesiba Tefu, the head of the Institute for African Renaissance Studies at UNISA. Just then, very quickly, maybe 2-3 quick building blocks that needs to be done immediately.
Look, when the current president was deputy president under Mbeki, there was a movement initiated and led by him called Moral Regeneration, right? And then subsequently led by Father Mkhatshwa. I'm saying there are structures across the country, some of them at least institutionalized. Now, maybe we should revisit those structures, revitalize them. 2, religious education and not Christian education is one of those things I would suggest we consider. Along the lines of a pledge, not necessarily a pledge, but any attempts like human rights education at elementary level, at primary schools, human rights education and values, as was initiated then in the Department of Education.
Okay, that's where we're going to, we want a news time. That's where we're going to leave it, Professor Tefu. I'll tell you what, on the issue of maybe, where does religion then fit into South Africa? Probably a discussion we need to have on our very own. One of the other big questions we'll have sometime in the week. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so